Hi guys, and welcome back to another IBRACORP video. It's a pleasure to have you guys back here this week. Thanks for tuning in. And this week we've got a video in collaboration with Brian over from the awesome open source channel. And we love working with Brian as usual. So I hope you guys enjoy this video where we're going to be comparing some open source and closed source tools and taking in some of your feedback you guys sent to our most recent poll as well, just to give us an idea on how the community uses their tools and what they're into. I'll pass it over to Brian to introduce himself as well for his channel.
It's your open source advocate, and yes, I am super excited to be doing another collaboration with the IBRACORP channel. It's always fun, we always have a good time, and we always get more ideas out of these things. I'm excited to do this one. It's one that I've kind of been thinking about for a while and really wanted to do, but I wanted to do it in collaboration with some other folks because I've gotten so far from a lot of closed source stuff that it's hard for me to know what to compare. So we came up with a really great list this week. I'm excited about it. So I'm ready to get started. How about you?
Definitely ready to get started. And we've had some really good ideas thrown at us over the past week. But these are ones that are commonly used by you guys or in many professions, and how you can apply both closed and open source tools to your environment, whether it's enterprise or just at home with your own home lab. So the first one we've got is Tabby. Now I think this was your suggestion, wasn't it, Brian, for a tool that I use called Termius. Is that right?
Yeah, and actually this came up the first time I think you brought up Termius with me. And I started thinking, well, there's got to be one out there that's open source. And I'll say right now, I do use Termius, and I did not realize it. I have an iPad, and I opened it up the other day, and sometimes early in the morning before the rest of my family gets up, I'll open it up, and I can do some updates on some of my VPS servers and my home servers and stuff real quick before everybody's awake and needing attention. And I happened to look at the app that I was opening, and it said Termius, and I said, is that the same app? So I went and looked it up. It actually is. So it's the same as like the app, and it does have some really cool features. So I do like Termius quite a bit. Um, so that aside, I started looking way back when you talked about this the first time,
Mm.
and I came across Tabby, and I made a video on it back a while back, but I really like it. It's pretty clean. It's pretty easy to open. Yeah. So I mean, so with Tabby, the nice thing about it is you can click to open up a terminal here in your local system, or you can click on the little squares here, and it'll bring up any kind of pre-set up systems that you've already got saved in there. So you can go in and basically save these things. I don't have to remember my passwords. I don't have to set up my keys again, anything like that. It just kind of comes in, and now I'm logged into a remote system, which is great. You can do all the same things you would always do. You get a nice simple screen, and it does have the ability to split the screen, to split your tab. But so like with things like with Terminator, which I've shown in the past, it'll split the window, but it opens it on your local machine. Then you've got to SSH in again, where this will actually just pop you into that same into another SSH session on a separate panel, I guess is the best way to put it. So let's see, yeah, split. If we just say up, so split it in two basically. So now I'm logged in to the same system on two different panels here, and I can keep splitting this apart and kind of getting multiple panels open to do things, which I do quite a bit. I don't know about a lot of these users, but I know when I'm working on a system, a lot of times I try to open up more than one terminal because I want to see and compare different things in different places on the system. And when they're headless, of course, the terminal is the only place you've got to work, right? So for me, having something like this where it's got these dual panels open is nice, and not having to type SSH, Brian at whatever, and passwords, and make sure keys are in place and all that stuff all the time is great. So it's a really nice tool. It's a desktop tool for sure, but yeah, I
So
really enjoyed Tabby.
So looking at that, that has a lot of the features that I enjoy out of Termius, and I'll bring up Termius. So Brian's just shown us Tabby. Now we're just going to have a look at Termius for you guys to compare as well. Keep in mind that Termius is a closed source product. It's a paid product. You can use it for free. So maybe you call it freemium, I suppose. Some of the features that you'd really want, though, you end up wanting to pay for if you enjoy those features. So some of those features include being able to synchronize across devices. So all of your hosts and whatnot, will just synchronize anywhere you go. I think on the free one, that doesn't happen. So if you change the password on your desktop for a server, it may not have reflected on the mobile app. Otherwise, pretty similar to what Brian just showed us in Tabby. I would say pretty comparable. If we go to, this is our hosts. We've got all these hosts here. You can create groups for them. And we go in, and it's pretty much exactly the same as what Brian just showed us. In fact, I'm not even sure. I think there's a way you can split it, but not as easy as what Tabby offers. But you can definitely do that as well. So what do you think
Nice.
about it, Brian? Is this like why do you use the mobile one on your iPad?
Just it was the first one that came up when I did a search for a terminal emulator on the
Oh,
iPad.
okay. All right. Yeah, that's fair enough.
I'm an easy person, man, when it comes to that kind of stuff. So if they paid to have their stuff at the top, then that's what came up. And I try, I've tried several since then, just to see if there was anything different out there. And honestly, Termius on the iPad is incredibly easy to use because I don't use a hardware keyboard on my iPad. I use a software keyboard, and it seems to know how to get out of the way. I will say on the first iPad I used, that my wife is a native Spanish speaker, so I had the Spanish keyboard turned on at the same time as the English keyboard, and for some reason it got confused, and it would not let me put in things like the tilde, for slash, for like tilde slash, for the home directory, and it wouldn't put in hyphens in the right place. So doing simple commands made it kind of tricky for me. I had to kind of figure out what was going on, and I finally found a post somewhere where somebody said, "Oh yeah, you've probably got an international keyboard turned on. Turn that off, and then your stuff will work right." But
Right.
I mean, that was really more of that was me. That was a me problem,
Yeah,
not a
that's
Termius problem.
definitely a you problem, but we've all been there, so it's kind of a us problem.
Yeah,
Um,
that's it.
well, one thing I'm not sure about if Tabby can do, and you might be able to correct me on this, is snippets. So something I really enjoy also in Termius is snippets. So if I just go into a server, so with snippets, we have it here on Termius where I can pretty much have the commands ready to go for common things that I'm always running or whatever the case might be. Here, for example, here's one to install our IBRA menu. And then we also have something like bash top or just rebooting. Sometimes you just don't want to type it. So Control S will bring that panel up and put it away, and then you can just sort of click run, and it'll run the command. I think you can even have keybinds for it as well. Does Tabby offer that? Do you know?
I don't know. I haven't even tried to do anything like that. Never even thought about trying to do something like that. I didn't even know Termius had that, honestly. So
Yeah, especially handy on
you
the
just taught me
mobile.
something.
Yeah, especially handy on the mobile app. Just because the amount of typing you'd have to do on those keyboards, as you know, is a nightmare. So you can automate a little bit of it. Just makes it a bit easier.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I've always been a bash shortcuts person, so I create shortcuts. Instead of typing out sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade -y, I just make it like sapt up or something, and that way I can just type in like 6 letters and it knows what I want. So, as long as you can remember what you create, what you make the shortcuts, in any kind of bash shell, it'll work for you.
absolutely.
But no, I didn't know about those snippets. That's pretty awesome. I need to find out if Tabby does that, but not off the top.
I would definitely love to know if it does. But I think, honestly, for most people, it looks like Tabby would accomplish the same thing, really. Being also self-hosted, that's always a plus.
Yeah, now the syncing and stuff, I know Tabby has a config file, and so when I first installed it, I set it up on one machine, and I was like, oh, I don't want to go set up all those things on another machine. So I realized, oh, there's a config file, so I just copied that over with SCP and opened it up, and it worked. So it doesn't exactly just sync, but I guess you could put it in like a syncing program if you wanted to, something like a C file or Nextcloud or anything. Put it in a place where it's getting synced all the time, and then if you make changes on one, it would sync to the other. Just tell Tabby to look there for its config.
Well, I reckon that's a pretty good comparison. What's next on our list, Brian?
Oh, a big one. Microsoft Office versus LibreOffice, which
this is a
is always
contentious one. Yeah,
tricky one. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of open source, and I actually have to use Microsoft Office pretty much every day in my job, and have had to do that since I've had a grown-up job, I guess is the best way to put it.
I think most people would probably agree with that. Being,
Yeah,
365 is just everywhere.
Yeah, they're the giant gorilla in the tiny room, right? You can't get away from it. But in my home life, I definitely use LibreOffice. With some of my clients, I use LibreOffice as well. And I set it up for a client a while back, and I just changed the icons so that they look like the Office icons, and they've never asked me a thing about it. I mean, that's, to me, a subjective type thing, though. It really depends on what you're trying to do with it. If you're an accountant and you're trying to use LibreOffice, there's going to be a learning curve for the change. I believe that LibreOffice could absolutely do it as far as like the calc program versus Excel. But I think if you're very accustomed to Excel, that's one of those things it's a hard change to make, and you have to just tell yourself, I want The client I set it up for are not what I would call heavy users of Office. They use it for certain things, but they're not what I would call, you know, big time users like that, like where you have specialized things for accountants or things like that. So for writing, you know, for any kind of Word, you know, documents and things like that, they both use the same things in the back end, as far as I know. They both use the XML language. That's kind of an open source XML language. I think Microsoft just adds some stuff on top of what they have
I
in the open
believe
source
so,
version.
yeah.
So that's why you get some extra features, right? That's why a lot of stuff seems to open just fine in LibreOffice, and some of the things get all messed up when you try to open them. So it just depends on what it is and what you've used as far as, you know, the tooling and things like that. But yeah.
Yeah, I thought I'd just bring this up while, yeah, Brian's making
Yeah.
some great points, and I've probably been one of those people that, because I've been offered 365 as part of my work life for so many years, I've never really had to be put in a situation where I wanted to look for an alternative. So I don't mind using Microsoft Office. In fact, it's just convenient because it's always there. But if I really wanted to put in the time, I probably would start looking at LibreOffice again. It's been a long time since I gave it a try. And back when I did give it a try, and I'm talking over 10 years, it really was a big contrast to Microsoft Office, to me at least anyway. And I felt
Yeah.
like it was a bit of a jump that things weren't there, and you get frustrated because you just want to get a document finished and you can't find the common function that you always used in Office. So I find it really interesting what you just said, where you tried out not telling the person that they were using it and going as far as changing the icons, and they didn't say anything. So that's a really good test. That's really good.
You know, and like I said, with lighter users, I think it's easier. You know, you can see here on the document, right? They're marking out some things that aren't quite comparable. And you're right. Like, 10 years ago, night and day. I mean, huge difference. Today, you know, LibreOffice has made some huge leaps and some huge strides in the last few years. In fact, there's some other options out there too that people might mention. Is Onlyoffice is one that's also supposed to be really good and comparable with Microsoft Office.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, it depends on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish, and what compromises you're willing to make. I mean, whether you go open source or whether you go closed source, you're making a compromise somewhere. So for me, it's more about, okay, what are my alternatives? You know, can I use it for free? Yes. If I'm using it in a professional setting, should I pay something for it? Should I donate money to the project? Yes. Because that helps keep that project going from an open source standpoint. You know, Microsoft Office is never going to go away. Microsoft makes millions and billions probably off of Office
Oh, mate,
365 subscriptions, you know. So
it's got to be the main cash
that's
cow
one
at
good
this
thing
point.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a
100%.
great thing about it, right? You never have to worry about it leaving now. How much input do you have over what Microsoft does with it?
Exactly right.
Zip, right? But you know, with open source projects, you can have a lot of input. You can take it, and if you're a coder, you can go and add something to it. You can subtract something from it. You can fix something that didn't work the way you thought it should. You know, and submit that back to the project. If you're not a coder, you can contribute to the project monetarily. You can make requests for changes and enhancements. You can, you know, point out issues where you're like, hey, if I had this thing, I would be able to switch over full time. And that might prompt them to say, you know what, let's try to do that. Let's see what it takes. So it just depends, right? It's just one of those things where you've got to say, is this worth it to me? And what's the best thing for what I have to accomplish? And sometimes you just need the right tool, right? I worked at a place that always says, use the right tool for the job. You know, don't grab a hammer when you've got to turn a nut onto a bolt. So it's probably, you might get it to work at some point, but it's not going to be the thing that you wanted in the end. So yeah, I think LibreOffice these days is a total option. If you're somebody who's looking to move away from Microsoft Office, I think it's an option. I think it's something where you have to really sit down and evaluate, what do I do with Office? And then something like this sheet where you've got right here where it's got a comparison, something where you sit down and say, okay, I'm going to take this thing and open it up in LibreOffice and see how broken it is, right? How much am I going to have to do to fix this? That's the real question there. And if you're somebody like me where you're saying, hey, I've got a client and I want to switch them, I knew before I did it. Okay, so don't just feel like I did this haphazardly. I knew before I did it that they were very light users of Office. I would never do that to a client who was an accounting firm. if they mentioned they were tired of Office and they wanted to switch, I would absolutely say let's check out LibreOffice and see what breaks and see if you're willing to put up with that. But I would definitely walk them through
Yeah,
that
that's
process.
definitely a different requirement, I would say, depending on what you're doing.
Yeah,
But an important point you made before was you don't have to be a coder, and I think that's an important thing to try and get more people to use it, is not to make it so difficult. And so if they can make it easy, then more people are willing to try it. Whereas if you came in and it was just a big shock, you can't be expected to go and code your own feature. But if you do like it and it's working really well and you want to help progress it further, then by all means, support the projects. We're big advocates of that on both our channels.
everything we show today, for sure, you can go support. I promise they've got a way to get some kind of monetary support. If you can't afford to support this project, but you're using the project, you can do other things to support them. You can point out bugs and be a good bug reporter. I've got videos where I've talked about how to report bugs in a really good way. If you're asking for an enhancement, again, the same thing, right? There's really good ways to ask for enhancements and changes. So kind of go learn about that. Go do a little bit of research. I don't want to cover it here. It's kind of outside the scope of this video, but
yeah,
definitely that's a great way to support the project, to let them know you're interested and to provide them some good feedback, because it just helps them tremendously if you do things in a way that makes it easy for them to understand what you're asking for.
If we had to compare the three, so Office, LibreOffice, and OnlyOffice, which one are we going to go with? What would you rate LibreOffice to compare it with something like Microsoft Office out of 10?
If Microsoft Office was the standard, I would say LibreOffice is definitely at an 8. If Microsoft Office was a 10, I'd say LibreOffice is at an 8 today. Excellent. And that's really more like I've started with Office and I have to move over.
Yeah.
If I had never started with Microsoft Office and I just needed to start fresh, I'd say totally comparable. Yeah. You're going to be able to do your job with either one.
Something we all use as well, whether it's for your private life or at work. Something else we use pretty often is a way to communicate, and we're doing so right now by using Discord for this particular video. And that was my suggestion. Brian also has and uses his open source options with his community. So let's talk a bit about that, because we have a lot of users in our community on Discord, and it's definitely become a very mainstream product. You hear about it all the time. It's embedded in almost every website. It's fairly popular, especially over the past few years. How would you compare it to some other options, Brian? Like, I think we've written down Matrix, Rocketchat, Mattermost, and for video and whatever, we've got Jitsi as well.
So I think, honestly, at the end of the day, if you need text chat and video and audio communication, any of these things are going to work for you. If you're a person who says, I don't want to have to set this up and support it because I've already got something else I'm trying to do. I'm trying to run a channel. I'm trying to run a development program. I'm trying to run an open source project. I mean, a lot of open source projects use Discord. And the whole reason that they do that is because they don't want to have to support another thing, right? They're already supporting the software that they're trying to create. So when you look at it from that perspective, to me, Discord is really a great option for anybody who says, I just need something that works and something that I can log into and have my community there and we can use it. I think the next big thing about Discord is that you get a lot of communities in one. So like right now on mine, I've got your community on IBRACORP. I've got NetMaker because I've been looking at that stuff with the WireGuard things. I've got Work Adventure, which is a really, really cool way to kind of communicate with people in another way. It's kind of a virtual office that you play like a video game and you can meet with people and have video conferences and stuff. So I've got a bunch of those things where I've done videos on that, or I'm working on videos on that, and their support communities are on Discord because they're already supporting their own software they don't want to support, trying to keep something else running on top of that.
Absolutely.
That said, I love Rocketchat. I use Rocketchat, and it's gotten more difficult recently because they've got some updates that they haven't really updated their documentation for, so I haven't been able to do that, but I still like it. I think it's a really great system. I use it, and it's got some similar features. So Scott from Scottabyte has a Rocketchat server, and he added me to his server, and it did kind of like you see in Discord. It just added it over to the left panel, and I can just click on his server and I can click on my server and kind of jump back and forth between them, and I get messages from either one. So notifications, that kind of stuff. So it does have, I guess what you'd call, federation is the best way to put it. You really federate two servers. You don't have to, jump into different applications or sign out of one and sign into the other. So that's really nice. And then it's got video and audio with Jitsi, which is tremendous. Matrix, the same thing. Matrix has, I think you were showing Matrix a while ago. It has the same thing, chat, right? It's got federation between your servers. People can sign up for one server and still access you on your server, which is pretty nice. And then video and audio chat through Jitsi. So most of these open source things have a Jitsi plug-in, just because it's really become top of the line in open source world for sure for audio and video chat. And you can run it on your own Jitsi server, or you can run it off the main Jitsi server. Completely up to you. Matrix is the same exact thing as Rocketchat. They're very Slack-like, so if you use Slack, it's very similar.
Yeah,
if you're part of multiple communities, yeah, you can jump between them. So yeah, very very cool. And they have Jitsi also.
So when you say they have Jitsi, are you saying that's built in?
Yeah.
So it's built into the application?
No, it's not built in. You really go into the configuration of your application in the GUI there, and you just tell it like, hey, I want to use a Jitsi for my video conference, and then it just says, okay, what's the URL? And if it's your URL, then API key or something like that you've got to go create real quick out of your Jitsi system and put it in there, just to make it communicate.
Still, that's pretty good.
Yeah. It's a really super easy setup from that standpoint, and they've got multiple ways of monetizing their stuff, which is, a really good thing, I guess. I think Mattermost has kind of freemium. I hate to say that, because really it's more like, hey, here's extra features if you're a corporation that you might want. I feel it's more like that, right? Like single sign-on, OAuth type things, that kind of stuff that you can set up for all your applications through your company. That would cost you, I think, a premium type thing, just still not expensive. Rocketchat has some premium stuff that you can get. And then Matrix, I don't want to say, because I don't really know how Matrix actually does their stuff, but yeah, I mean, they're both, any of them are going to have tons and tons of features for a home user, a small business, anything like that. I would say you're going to have more features than you can handle even in the free version.
Do you know what my problem with that is, Brian?
Right?
Is
yeah.
My problem with that, Brian, is that I'm feeling like in the communities that watch our videos, there's a lot more people that, once they start scratching the surface, they get kind of addicted. Oh, at least I was one of them. And then you end up being what they now call a prosumer. You kind of know what you're talking about. You delve a little bit more into the details, and you're looking for something specific. Do you think that these, plans that are being offered, where they say, okay, this is really for a business, but they have features in there that you would actually really like to use, like, for example, if I just scroll up here, in the starter kit, which they call professional, or the professional starter kit, if we come down, it's got 365 integrations. Now, I would say, if you were a person that had a 365 setup, you bought a license, having the integration would be pretty cool. So there's kind of always that little bit of a barrier I've found. Do you think that's the case when they try to add these sort of freemium options?
I don't know that it's the case. I mean, I can't say that it's not either, but I also think about, okay, if I'm I don't know if Microsoft charges a fee to have the O365 capability of integration to Mattermost. I don't know if that's why that becomes part of a premium package. I don't know if Mattermost says, no, I need, this just seems like a premium feature to us. We're going to put it on this side, right? But, it's hard for me to say for sure that that's the case, but
pigeonholed you on that one, didn't I?
No, I mean, it's a fair question, right? And that's me being honest. I just don't use those features, so it's hard for me to talk about, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for you, where you seem to think like, hey, that that seems kind of cruddy. Maybe that's good feedback for Mattermost.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're there to make money, but at the same time, they're there to make a product that people want to use. So if you put it, if you put things in that the average guy wants to use because he has an O365 subscription, you know, the $69 a year or whatever it is. And he says, you know, I'd like to just log in with that credential and not have a separate one. Then it suddenly becomes like, well, now that's $10 for Mattermost. Well, now that's $5 for Jitsi. Well, now that's, you know what I mean? It's the nickel and diming thing, right? It used to be great to cut the cord, as they say, for TV because you could stream everything on Netflix. Well, now you got to have 75 different subscriptions, so you didn't save any money by cutting the cord on TV, right?
Absolutely,
So
mate.
it's
Absolutely.
the same deal, right?
And even with the options like Plex, like we could sit here and talk about it all day, which we won't do, but you know, it's more and more starting to lean towards what we all ran away from. You know,
exactly.
Built-in advertising or linking stuff that you just didn't want. You have no option to turn it off, but it's there.
That's right.
So that's why we want to support open source projects, and hopefully you guys will too. Now, the next one on our list, we just discussed communication software or apps, and I think that was a really good one because there's a lot of options out there now, and I think they're all of good quality, not very poor comparisons.
We didn't even cover like a tenth of them.
Oh,
There's so many now.
Yeah, 100%. And that's another thing, guys. If you think of stuff that we've missed, obviously there's a huge list. We're not going to read everything. But if you have an idea of an app that you've been using that we haven't mentioned and others should know about, just drop it in the comments. Let us know because other people would like to find out that sort of stuff. So, Brian, I'll let you start off. We're going to be talking about ESXi versus something like Proxmox, which we've recently been covering, and you've covered on your channel as well. So, what are your thoughts on that?
So I'm a Proxmox person. I've seen ESXi, VMware stuff is tremendous, and I've seen people use it in professional environments, you know, pretty regularly, and I see, you know, what they do with them. Hyper-V, same way, right? So if you're talking about virtualization, you're talking about running virtual machines or containers or who knows what, right? You're trying to get the most out of a massive piece of hardware. Maybe you're trying to get the most out of a Raspberry Pi. Who knows? I think virtualization is an incredible tool that we have these days, especially as home lab enthusiasts, as open source enthusiasts, where we want to try new things and we need more than one machine to do it on maybe. This makes it really, really great. So Proxmox is an open source tool that does have a premium subscription that you can get. And I hate to say premium, more professional, I guess, but it has a few extras that you can get for their subscription pricing. It is definitely for what I would say is a corporation level.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean it's got some amazing capabilities, and I'm here to say that I've been using it for about a year and a half, and I still haven't even scratched the surface on what it can really do. It's just an amazing tool. Just the free open source version is awesome. So virtualization of regular VMs, including Windows. If you want to virtualize Windows, you can absolutely do that.
Windows 11 as well,
containers.
Just to add that, yeah. Easily.
Yeah, Windows 11, yeah, you can virtualize that, yeah.
Check of a button and we'll give you your TPM.
So again, Scott Abide, I know I keep talking about him. He's a fun guy, but he actually did a video not long ago on how to virtualize, I think, Windows 11 in an LXC container, which blows my mind.
That's nice. So check that one out.
So I mean, you can virtualize all kinds of stuff, but LXC containers are super lightweight ways to virtualize an operating system without having to virtualize the hardware, which is awesome because you kind of get all of the benefits of the OS without having to virtualize that hardware. So it really is super low resource usage when you do those. It's just amazing. I use them for a lot of things, and they're great. And then of course Docker, you know, doing Docker stuff inside of virtual machines for me is just terrific because I've got a snapshot of my virtual machine. My Docker stuff gets snapshotted with it, so if anything goes down, just bring the virtual machine back up from the snapshot, and it's really quick to recover from that kind of stuff. So yeah, Proxmox for me has been a tremendous tool. Looking at knowing what I've seen others doing on the professional level systems of ESXi, you know, with VMware, that kind of stuff. And they say professional like Proxmox isn't, it is, but you know, those closed source systems, I would have to say that Proxmox could probably meet, just off the top of my head, 95% of their needs, if not 100%. Just knowing what they do and why they're running them and what they're doing with them. The one thing I'm not sure about is I know with VMware and a few others, and now getting into like AWS, where you have the cloud-based VMs and stuff, you can script it. I don't know if it's all click and drag at this point yet, but you know, Brian wants to spin up a VM so that he can do some testing real quick. So in the background, that thing goes, okay, in 3 minutes, you're going to have this connection. And then I've got this desktop that looks like Windows 10, and I've got all the software installed that my developer said I needed to run this test. And I run the test, and when I'm finished in about 10 minutes, it sees there's no activity, and it destroys the VM.
That's interesting.
That would be pretty awesome. Yeah, I don't think that Proxmox does that just out of the box. You could probably script it if you're really, really good at scripting. But definitely that might be one that I think is more of a cloud-based type thing. I'm not sure VMware totally supports that, but I think I've seen some stuff where you can definitely kind of have it spin things up on demand. They're things that already exist. They're just off, but they'll spin up on demand kind of like that and then spin back down on their own. So, just that'd be the only big difference I've seen. What about you, just from your experience with VMs? And
Yeah, so I mean, I've bounced around a fair bit with VMs over the years. Most recently in my work life, a lot of Microsoft Hyper-V is the go-to at the moment, in my work environment anyway, because we work as technicians for local government. It's really up to us. I'm basically a system administrator at any of the sites I work at, so we could implement something else, but time versus money, they already have this OEM licensing to Windows and Microsoft Server, so it kind of just makes sense to use it for our needs. But I think, having used Proxmox quite detailed for the past 12 months, it can definitely do everything you need. It can do everything you need. And when I say need, I mean what you actually need. Do you need a VM that blows up after 10 minutes at home? Probably not as often as you would think. And if you did, then I guess if that's all you're hanging on, Proxmox probably isn't for you. But I think it could do most of the things that most people would need. VMware is also just very easy to use. I've used that many times as well, and it does make it a lot easier. I have found, if I'm being honest with Proxmox, something that you would think is simple never is. And you might just have to do a little digging around, and you'll get the answer, and then you'll realize it was simple, but you were just looking at the wrong field, or you dropped down the menu and you clicked on the wrong one by accident. All of a sudden, you can't find the option anymore. Like, it's just stuff like that, and I think that's being worked on as time goes on. They are regularly updating it, which is great. But other than that, it's been doing the job fine. I've virtualized it both in the cloud and at home, and seems to be running pretty stable. That's my experience with it.
Yeah, I've really had no issues with Proxmox. I run 2 servers with it right now, and it runs great. And it's funny you say that, because like, the one thing I wish that they would have in the UI that would make it much easier, and I guess I get why they don't, but to attach external storage to the VM. I would just love to be able to do that right through the UI and say, like, hey, I'm allocating this bit of storage to this VM, and whenever you spin the VM up next time, just let it act like, hey, you plugged in a USB drive. Because right now on Linux, when you plug in a USB drive, it sees it, it mounts it. It doesn't make you go through all this trouble of, creating a mount partition and mounting that thing through FS-Tab anymore. And, just, oh my gosh, that part for me is probably what would kill it for a good number of people, I think. The funny thing is, if you start up Proxmox with all of your drives in place, it finds them. It just sees them, and you can just go set them up right there through the UI, no problem. But if you try to add storage later, it's the same deal. You have to go and mess with the stuff inside of the terminal and get it all mounted and get it to recognize it and make sure it's formatted properly. And then you got to go mess with it in the UI to allocate it. And that's one of the places I feel like they could really put some effort in to make things a bit easier.
I don't know if I'm going to be talking about the same thing, but I have had to plug in a USB and then attach that to the Unraid virtual machine in order for that to start. And that was pretty straightforward. Is that what you mean, or do you mean something else?
No, so for me, like I started without some storage on one of my Proxmox machines at one point, and I went and added a 4 terabyte drive to it.
I see what you mean.
Rebooted, and I thought, hey, this thing will pick up the 4 terabyte drive, no problem. It didn't care what was there. It didn't care how it was plugged in. It didn't care if it was USB. It didn't care if it was SATA. It just didn't see it until I went into the UI did not present it to me. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
I think Proxmox, the underlying operating system, saw it. Debian saw it. It just was like, well, you haven't assigned this to anything yet. So yeah, I had to, had to go in and basically create the partitions with, parted and do all the stuff you have to do, right? And then mount it and that kind of stuff. And then when I rebooted, then Proxmox in the UI saw it, and I could go and allocate it through the storage stuff and that kind of thing. But yeah, for me that was a learning curve because it was something that I just didn't think you would have to do.
I see what you mean. Yeah, exactly. Look, it's little things like that made it very frustrating. I will be perfectly honest and say that I dropped Proxmox 3 or 4 times before really wanting to embed myself and just stick it out. And, I'm glad that I did. I ended up learning and now I understand it more. But that's the thing. It takes a little bit more patience, I've found, as opposed to maybe just VMware. Also, documentation-wise, VMware's been around for a long, long time. So when you go to look up stuff, you'll find Stack Overflow links galore. But one thing that I have a complaint about Proxmox, we haven't whinged enough already, is I do think they should have like a home plan or something that's a little bit cheaper than 95 euros. I think that's a bit steep for someone who tries it, but once, I guess to be fair though, it's probably got features you don't really need, so maybe that's why. But I just found I would have supported the project if it was a little bit cheaper. Me personally.
Yeah. Yep. For what I use it for, I can't justify, whatever the cost is in US dollars either. But yeah, I mean it's it's something that I wish they had kind of like I don't know, I'd do like $29 a year or something like that, right? I mean that. Yeah. Just to support it and say, just keep going with what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Or have a donate button. I mean, something, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'd want a subscription of some sort, but that's $100 for you. So it's about $150 for me. It's pretty expensive, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's when you have a family to take care of, that
exactly
eats away, right? So
exactly.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that's a good comparison of the two. If you guys were going to look at either option, and there's other options as well for virtualization, plenty of them out there. I would say I personally would give Proxmox a 9. I think there's a little bit of room for improvement, but everything else, it's going to do what you need. And if you want to learn more and go really hardcore, you can do that as well. Gives you that option. And best of all, it's totally free. So what's your review, Brian? What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I'm pretty much right there with you with a 9. I think a 9 out of 10. And only because I know, like, if somebody at some point, if it's the tinkerer side that I think kind of takes that point away, which is they're going to set it up on something with a fairly small drive to try it out, and they're going to say, oh, I want to add storage, and then they're going to realize, oh, okay. That's where the pain comes in. So yeah. I think that's, so my suggestion would be, if you decide you want to go to Proxmox, plan what you want to run it on and put the storage in, but when you install, and it'll just see it, and you won't have to deal with that. Later, when you're really used to it, you can grow into more storage.
And for the last comparison, before we go into some of the comments to see what the community feels about open and closed source, I think we were going to discuss DNS.
No, I've not used NextDNS. You brought that one up, right? Do you have that?
I started using it for 2 weeks. I gave it a period of, May 6th. About a month, actually. And I wanted to just trial it. I know that it is closed source, or is it open source? I'm not really sure. Freemium. I know it's a freemium product, which we'll get into. And also just set up PiHole yesterday for our comparison. And I have also used AdGuard before that, which is what led me to NextDNS. Because it died on me, I thought I'd try something for a couple of weeks and see how it goes. So those are my options I'll show you today. Do you have anything else you want to show? You're a big user of PiHole, aren't you?
Yeah, I use PiHole, and then I use Unbound with it, to basically handle the actual DNS part. I mean, PiHole kind of, the DNS query goes out, and as it comes back, it says, oh, hey, this page also tried to send back a bunch of ads. I'm going to send those off to nowhere for you. which is the whole point, right? It tries to help with ads anyways. It does a decent job. It gets rid of a lot of stuff that it knows of. So yeah.
All right. Well, I'll get you to talk about Unbound. I'm not really familiar with it personally, so I think it'd be good to talk about. I'll show you my two things I've got going, NextDNS, and for those that don't know, PiHole as well. I'll just quickly show that. So in NextDNS, you've got the analytics. So obviously the analytics look quite nice. It's not self-hosted. So for those who like self-hosting stuff, this isn't self-hosted. So you would be relying on sending your DNS entries to technically a third party. That third party then filters it and moves it on. Now looking through here, you won't see too much. I've masked the IPs obviously. But if you have a look, it gives you some detailed info, where your queries are coming from or going to, and gives you some detail on how your home is using that setup. So basically to set it up, it's pretty simple. You go to setup here, it gives you a unique IP. You put that in your router or on your client devices, just like any other DNS, and it will come through. But the options they give you are quite interesting. So if you go through security, you've got threat intelligence built into it. You can have threat detection, Google safe browsing, so you can force safe browsing if you've got small kids, things like that. Cryptojacking, DNS rebinding, all these other features that they offer. You can even block top level domains as well. Then you've got privacy, which is where we add our block lists. So if you're familiar with ad blockers, you'll know you've got block lists, you can just add them here. So that is comparable, I guess, to PiHole and AdGuard. It's got these things as well. And then you have parental control. So you can start limiting stuff even more, giving you a safe search option, YouTube restricted mode, and block bypass. Anything that blocks as well, you can enable a custom page to come up from NextDNS, telling them that, speak to the administrator or whatever the case might be. You deny list, allow list, and then obviously the analytics again. If you go to settings, you can pick where you want your data to be stored. Now they claim, if I just expand this, the logs are stored in Zurich, Switzerland, a place known for its strong privacy laws. Well, to me, reading that, I don't know whether they're just adding that and they're still using my data anyway. Doesn't really tell me much. But I picked it anyway out of the other options. And there's the block page that we talked about and some performance stuff as well. So that's NextDNS. It's been working fine. I have had some false positives, but that comes back to the block lists, I think, mostly. But in comparison to PiHole, I honestly don't think you're getting much more. You're better off going with something that is self-hosted, in my opinion, and it does a fine job as well. So I'll leave this up, and Brian, maybe you can talk to us about Unbound and what that does for you, and I'll just go, scroll through PiHole so people can have a look.
Yeah, so I mean, PiHole does a lot of the things you just showed on NextDNS. It has a lot of the same features. I'm not sure it has the parental controls. I don't look at that just because I haven't had kids until now. I'm trying to adopt one, but I've got kind of things logged down on her systems from different angles anyways. But it does have, the DNS capability under the settings where you can kind of go set your DNS servers. So they have preset DNS servers like Cloudflare, OpenDNS, several different ones that you can pick. But the other option is you can do custom. So what I did was I went and I basically set up Unbound, which is a DNS system that points to your top level DNS. So if you point to Cloudflare does a lot of DNS and they cache a lot of stuff, but they also point to a top level DNS provider, a top tier provider, to actually get all that information. So what Unbound does is it just kind of skips around all those guys and says, I'm just going to go straight to these top tier providers. And you're kind of skipping around those guys too by becoming your own DNS provider, essentially. So I run Unbound, and then I point my PiHole to Unbound, and then all my traffic goes that way out to a top tier provider. And then inside the Unbound config, you can change some settings to make it TLS only, DNS, that kind of stuff too. So I kind of like it. It's a really, really cool project. I hope that it'll continue. It's out there and it seems to get updates, which is great. So yeah, I really like the way that functions. And then setting up in PiHole, basically what you see right there in that little screen that you had, yeah. So on the right side, you've got that custom, and yeah, you would just uncheck the boxes on the left and check the boxes on the right, put in your IP address for your Unbound server and the port that you're running it on, and then let it go, and it works really well. I've had no real issues with it so far. And then PiHole does exactly what you said. It just basically looks for ads and blocks those things. You've got block lists that are defaulted, but you can add other block lists, and then you can do white and black lists of sites and everything like that too. So, and it gives you stats, it keeps track of things, and you can tell it kind of what level of statistics you want it to keep. Basically, don't keep any, the most private way to kind of do it, which is like, I don't care what people went to, just don't keep any stats, or keep everything so that I can kind of review it and see what's going on my network. Kind of up to you when you set it up, how you want it to work. So yeah, I think PiHole's a tremendous project, and it, the name PiHole makes you say, oh, it has to run on a Raspberry Pi, but no, you can run it in a VM, you can run it in a Docker container, you can run it, just on a machine you've got at your house, as long as you're willing to leave that machine on and use it for DNS queries.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really a cool project, and it will run on a Raspberry Pi, and that's how I ran it for the first year and a half that I had it, which was kind of great because I had a little backup battery side kind of piece that if the power went out, my laptops would work and the Raspberry Pi would work, so I could still actually use it to get DNS queries as long as my battery-based Wi-Fi hotspot worked. I used it I pointed it to my Raspberry Pi as well for DNS, so yeah, it was really, really kind of a nice little setup. I eventually moved it over to Docker containers on a couple of different machines, so that if one goes down for maintenance, it switches over to the other one automatically. It's just set up as a second DNS option in my router, and it's constantly catching stuff.
That's a great idea, Brian. I actually want to touch on that real quick, because we get a lot of mixed answers about that. Adding your DNS to your router and then having it on a virtual machine or a Docker container, you will get a lot of opinions about it regarding it should be on a dedicated machine, or it's fine to virtualize. What Brian just said is a perfect example of a way to virtualize it, but also give you that dedicated machine, in air quotes, so that it's separated. Because you may come into the situation where that machine dies, and then no one in your house can get internet, or DNS queries are not answered. So having that backup is good. If you did want to do a dedicated machine, but you didn't want to go with a second virtualized option or another second dedicated machine option, you can put any other DNS, say Google DNS, as the secondary DNS. However, it just means you won't be able to guarantee that it's going through PiHole first. The next thing you can do is go to sign up with OpenDNS if you're interested, and add that as a secondary in your router. Then in PiHole, as Brian was talking about earlier, if I just go to settings, DNS, you've got OpenDNS here, so you can send those queries through OpenDNS as well. So you've got a few options to try and keep your data private. Obviously, if you're going through PiHole, but then it's going out through Google, it's still going out through Google. But if you want to control it even more, and what gives us that parental control to make it comparable to NextDNS is then, hooking up with OpenDNS. I think that's probably your best way around it if you're going to go down that route without having to go for a third party. But
I'm glad you mentioned that. I forgot that OpenDNS had the parental controls built into it. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
I only looked at it yesterday, so that's what jogged my memory. But yeah. I guess in saying that, it is technically still a third party, right? OpenDNS.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So pick your poison, I suppose, people. They're all the different options you've got.
Well, there's nothing wrong with dipping your toe in the water, right? Start with PiHole, see how it does. Have a backup DNS set up just in case your PiHole goes down or anything happens, right? But kind of watch and make sure that most of the traffic seems like it's going through your PiHole at least.
Exactly.
And then as you get more accustomed to it, you get it set up the way, because you can set up PiHole to be your DHCP server, and then you can do all kinds of stuff with it.
You can.
So you can do your DHCP server stuff, and yeah, you can basically route, like when you want to call your machine by name, you can tell it, hey, this machine has this name, and you can just put in that name. So a lot of cool things you can do with PiHole and things that it handles. And once you kind of get that set up, you say, okay, I want to set up a second one. There's several videos out there on the internet about how to sync two PiHoles together that people have come up with. It's a little kludgy. I think that they're working on their own little sync program. I hope they are. That's what I heard. I don't know when it'll be in there if they are, but that'd be awesome, because then you can run kind of like I do, two of them, and you don't have to go set them up, make all those changes in the same place all the time. You just make a change and it'll sync to the other one, right? So you've got kind of a master PiHole and a backup PiHole that gets its changes from that one.
Absolutely.
But either way, yeah, once you've dipped your toe in, then you say, you know what, I want to switch over to something like Unbound. That's kind of your next step, right? You just take them one step at a time. Make sure you're not completely breaking your network, because if you're like me and you have a family who's very demanding about the network, you won't get 3 minutes into your setup before they'll be telling you the internet's not working.
Yeah.
So, going slow and really learning about it and understanding it is never a bad thing. And with open source software like this, I think PiHole is tremendously easy to set up. 10,000 videos out there, including mine, on how to set it up and use it.
Yeah, well, make sure we drop that in the description. Let you guys have a look if you're interested. I think it's a good video.
Yeah.
Probably a big tip as well is when you're first starting off, don't go adding 500 ad block lists. You're going to end up having problems, almost guaranteed.
Yeah.
You can see here, I've got the default one that it came with, and then I've got two others. At least I think that's the default one. And if I go to the dashboard, you can see there's already 570,000 domains on that list, on those three lists. So do a list at a time, trial it for a couple of hours even, just make sure nobody complains. You can get to your common links fine, and then you should be right. You can start adding more stuff, do some ad block testing, things like that. All right, the other one is AdGuard. I don't know if you've used it, Brian, but I used it for quite a while. It's very easy to use. I think if you're looking for a more fire and forget option, AdGuard came across to me at least in that way. It'll do the same job, but you just kind of don't have to mess around with the settings. Whereas PiHole can be quite intricate if you want to be. I know a lot of our community like having their own local DNS. Having a web address that takes them somewhere, but it's only on their server, so they don't have to reach out to the internet. You can do that as well. What do you think, Brian? Should we move on finally to a couple of the comments we got given for the poll? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so here we are, guys. We're on the channel, and I put up this poll yesterday on behalf of Brian and I just to see what you guys had to say about it. And you can see, I was actually pretty surprised to see this response, but 85%, and mind you guys, we did clear this up. This is from our community on our channel. So I know that we have a lot of mixed users on our channel. I think if Brian was to put this up, he might get a different response. But here on our channel, we've had 85% say they use a mix of open and close. 14% only use open source. And then 1% closed source only. Now, I didn't really think anyone would pick this option because, I don't know, I find it odd that you would only choose to go with closed source almost purposefully, but the option's there nonetheless. Someone voted. And here's some of the comments. So Shane says, I like the philosophy behind open source projects, but when it comes to daily use, I'm more concerned with how well the tool gets the job done, what level of customization and control over my data I have, and how much I have to pay for it. As a result, my usage is very mixed. What do you think about that, Brian?
I mean, I can't disagree, right? It's always about, does the tool get the job done that you're trying to do? And if it doesn't, what are my options? If your only option is a closed source project and you have to get the job done, you have to get the job done, right? So I think that's a little bit of a call out for open source to kind of say, are we really providing a solution to the people who we're going after? Are we providing a solution to our target, or are we missing the mark based on what else is out there? So yeah, totally fair.
Definitely. He's also added some of the open source tools he does regularly use. Libreoffice, like we discussed. Firefox, that's a good one too. Calibre for ebook management. And SyncThing for file synchronization. I know SyncThing definitely has a good reputation there as well. For not open source... Yeah, sorry, mate.
Beast.
Yeah.
I don't know. SyncThing is a beast for me. I've set it up several times and it works for a while, and then something goes wonky on it, and I just don't know how to troubleshoot it.
Yeah.
So I'm still fighting with that one because I want to do a video on it, but I want to make sure that I know how to fix the problems that I run into too, so that if anybody else does, they can do that. But yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a
And
beast.
some of the non-open source stuff. Sorry, dropped my USB. Some of the not open source stuff. Plex, Media Monkey, and Obsidian. Now, I don't know about the last two. Obviously know about Plex, and I agree. I have wanted to love Jellyfin for so long. I want to do it, man. I want to make the jump, but something always pulls me back to Plex because it just works. Not always, I mind you. I actually have a lot of problems with Plex, but it works better than my experience with Jellyfin in terms of resource use. I don't know. I think that's more me, but I haven't used it in a long time, and some of our team has been using it recently, so we'll probably be covering it soon again, but apparently the reports have been good. I don't know about the other two, though. I haven't heard of those.
I haven't heard of those either, but I know Plex has been in the game for several years longer than Jellyfin. Plex is a beast too. It's the transcoder is really good. They've really made it so that it's a very lean operation, even when it has to be used. I think it runs lean anyways, and Jellyfin does get some resource usage going up on it. I've got my Jellyfin server that I run, and I do love it. I think it for me, because of the way I run it, I think it's very easy. I just don't tinker with it a lot. I don't have a lot of weird usage. I don't want to say weird usage, but usage from outside my home is not really a thing. It's really just me here at the house. My mom once in a while watches something on it. We run it through the Roku and stuff. But I do notice, like on the server that I run it on, I got 16 gigs of RAM, and when Jellyfin starts getting running, it will eat up all but like the last gig of RAM, just for no reason. So I think that's a caching issue, and that may be my setup, but it does seem I didn't have to do that with Plex to make it not do that in the past, so yeah. I think it's definitely something weird there. But yeah, I mean, I totally understand. Like Plex does do a good job. So Jellyfin, if any of you guys listen to this and watch this, just know you're doing a good job, but you've got work to do still.
Absolutely. We want to.
It's gotten great though over the last few years.
100%, and the work is still improving. So I hope it just gets to that level that makes me personally want to jump. I want to do it, and we definitely want to support that. Moving on to John Phillips, I think basically here John has commented. He finds himself using more and more open source products, and the best of the best to use. Key reason I'm seeking open source is because of the security aspect of it. Too often companies, especially the ones you pay for, use their product into marketing, use all your data into marketing and marketing disadvantage and marketing advantages for them. So your data is constantly being sold. And we all know that happens all the time. Doesn't matter where you are, where you sign up. You're basically a commodity if you're not careful. At least with open source, these things could be routed out because, or I think he said rooted out, because of the source code is readily available to be seen. I like what open source is doing about your channel, Brian. I do think that more and more people need to understand what open source really is, and I think we need more reviews on good open source products, which, thanks for sharing that, John. I think that's 100%, and that's exactly what Brian's been doing for a long time now, and I'm also catching up, trying to get that message out there. There's so many options, so many products, and I think a lot of people forget that sometimes it's just one person, one guy or girl sitting at home, decides one day they want to write an application up, they put it out for everyone to use free of charge, and that time they spend away from whoever or doing whatever, why not support people like that? They're just everyday people just doing something for the community, and if we can pitch in $5, $10, whatever, I think that's really good, and keeps them honest as well. What do you think?
100%. Yeah, I think if we can't support the projects that we love to use, then we shouldn't expect the projects to be there, and we shouldn't expect updates. For me, it's funny to hear him say that he likes it for the security aspect, because I know even sometimes still today, but really a lot in the past, you'd hear the argument of against open source being the security aspect. Well, anybody could see the code, anybody could go do something because they can see what's in the code and they can find all the flaws. Well, I mean, yes, but that's also the point of the security, is that they find them and they can fix them.
Correct.
Closed source projects I mean, people think that you can't get the source of closed source projects. That's not true. I mean, they can decompile those things and totally get the source. That's how they do it. And so they can still access all those bugs. It's just that you don't know about them either, right? So now you don't know what's vulnerable in the systems you're paying for. But yeah, I appreciate that he points out that he likes open source because of the security aspect of it. I think that's one of those things that gets overlooked and a lot of times over argued from the wrong side. And so I totally appreciate that. That's awesome.
I think not always the case, but when it comes to open source, generally, you're self-hosting it or you have some sort of control over that data. I mean, that alone should be enough of an incentive for you to think about trying to go down that route where possible. Like I said, we all use a mix. The PiHole is pretty obvious in this case that sometimes it's just easier what's established, and they have a lot of capital behind them. So they have a lot more people working on it. They have more time to develop it. Naturally, you might find a better option in closed source. But when you're doing that, just be mindful of maybe one day revisiting and thinking, I've used Office for quite a while now. Maybe I'll see what Libreoffice is like, which is me exactly.
Totally agree. I'm always watching the open source projects that I have hope for. I've covered a ton of open source projects on my channel. You've covered a ton of stuff on your channel. We haven't scratched the surface of open source. There is so much out there that I couldn't begin to hope to cover all of it. One, because it takes me so long to learn how something functions and what it does and how to do it. But just because there's so much out there, and sometimes I go and I check out a project that I'm really excited about and it just doesn't quite hit the mark for me. And when that happens, I really just, I bookmark it and I go back and check it later, and I go back and check it later, and I go back and check it later. A few months down the road, I check it again, just because I know that if they're working on it actively and I can see that progress, either on GitHub or on their pages where they're doing releases, that it's eventually going to get to where it hits that mark and where it really makes that change possible, that I'm looking for. So definitely don't ever give up on open source. Just know that it's always improving.
Absolutely.
Yeah, look at these. Good God. That's some amazing lists of videos right there.
Yeah, I just went through both our channels so people could just have a look. We've covered quite a few, and I think not just us, but feel free to have a look around and just see what options there are out there.
Absolutely.
This has been really fun, Brian. What do you think? I think it's maybe time to wrap it up.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. We've talked about a lot of stuff. If they've hung in with us this long, they've done a great job.
Yeah.
So real quick, do you have a channel you like to watch outside of ours? That's open source kind of based.
Definitely. Open source kind of based. I have watched a little bit of Scotty Bot's channel. So that's been good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do actually watch a little bit of Techno Tim sometimes. The Bearded Tinkerer. A couple of guys
I was about to say Techno Tim. I definitely hit his channel once in a while. He's got some good stuff, especially Proxmox based. He's a Proxmox guru, I think.
Yeah. No, definitely.
The Bearded Tinkerer. Yeah, I hit his stuff too. That's interesting that we kind of come across the same stuff. So I like that.
Yeah, and I'll give a shout out to Tom Lawrence at Lawrence Systems. His videos have been really good as well.
Yeah.
I followed a fair few of those. Would love to collaborate with all these people sometime. That'd be great.
That would be awesome.
We're all kind of doing something very similar, so it'd be fantastic. But what about yourself? Who have you got on your list?
I definitely watch Techno Tim pretty regular. He's got some great stuff. He's a Kubernetes guy too. So as I'm getting more interested in Kubernetes, I've been watching some of his things on that. And Paul Hibbert, I love Paul Hibbert. That dude's total entertainment, but he covers some really good stuff. Hibbert Home Tech, I think, is the channel. Yeah.
Oh, yep.
Yeah. Oh, Paul Hibbert's tremendous. He's a guy that basically, he was doing a job very similar to what I do, I think. I mean, just from what he describes, it sounds like what I do. And he's basically made his channel big enough that he quit his job and he does his channel full time. But he is super entertaining, but he does give you a ton of information in about a 10 or 12 minute video most of the time.
That's good.
And he's pointing me to a lot of products that I use. So I really like his channel. Yeah.
Well, there's some ideas for you guys. Where can people find you, Brian, just before we close up?
Oh, totally, yeah. They can find me So definitely on YouTube, Awesome Open Source is the channel, and try to put out videos every week. So yeah, with YouTube, it's the it's the Awesome Open Source channel. You know, that's really the best place to find me. Most of my social media just points you right back to my videos on YouTube. So if you're looking for me, YouTube's the best place to go. If you've got comments, definitely just leave them in my video links or video comments section. I do have a Rocketchat server that I run, so that's discuss.opensourcesawesome.com. And you don't have to create an account there. You can use some of your existing OAuth accounts like Google or GitHub or any of those to sign on and kind of use it. And I get a good group of people that come ask questions and look for different information from me. So yeah, we get a lot of stuff. Scott's pretty active on there, and yeah, we get lots of questions from people. And Scott kind of posts when he puts new videos out there too. So you can find a lot of information there.
Excellent.
How about you?
Make sure you guys check that out. Yeah, if you want to find us, we're also IBRACORP on our YouTube channel. Our website, IBRACORP.io, has all of our links to get you around. So I'll just probably direct you there if you like, and see if you're interested in our work. For those that don't know, we also write a lot of documentation that goes with our videos. So we have our docs.ibracorp.io page, and that's where you can find written guides that go with our videos, where we do a written one. And often we have to recommend that because, as you know, Brian, updating a video takes a lot of work, whereas updating a document is a lot easier. So we try to update those a lot more than videos. And I think Brian does the same thing with his show notes. Is that right?
Absolutely. I've got shownotes.opensourcesawesome.com. Yeah, you can go out there and see basically. Again, if I create notes for the video, if it needs notes, then I do it there, and then that way I can update those easily. And yeah. That's much easier than updating a video, unfortunately.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Brian. That was real fun, mate. I can't wait to do the next one. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. Yeah, I've got nothing else really. I hope you enjoy your day. Or it's probably your night there, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. You know, I'm just gonna say, you know, if I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, like, subscribe, tell your friends about it so they can come along on the journey with us. And we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one. We'll see you in the next IBRACORP video.